The sound of the suitcase hitting the floor was louder than thunder. A hollow thud that shook not just the wooden boards beneath my feet, but the bones inside my chest. I blinked, frozen. The streetlight leaking through the half-open curtains threw long, jagged shadows across the room. The walls seemed to lean closer, as if they too wanted to hear what she had just said. My daughter, my own flesh and blood, stood before me, her face wet with tears, her voice sharp enough to cut through the silence. "You're holding us back, Mom. Just take your things and move out." Her words cracked in the middle, but their impact didn't. They landed heavy, cruel, permanent. For a heartbeat, I forgot how to breathe. How could this be real? How could the same lips that once whispered, "Mommy, don't leave me," now spit out the order to go? The suitcase lay on its side, unzipped from the force. A shirt spilled out, crumpled, helpless like me. That bag wasn't just fabric and zippers. It was the same one I carried when I arrived in California years ago, filled with dreams stitched together with hope. Tonight, it wasn't a symbol of beginnings. It was a coffin for everything I thought we were. Her chest rose and fell, anger mixing with grief. I could see her knuckles, white from gripping the doorframe, as though she needed something solid to keep herself from collapsing. But what about me, who was holding me up? My mind screamed. When did I become a stranger in my own home? When did I stop being her safe place and start being her burden? The silence between us stretched, heavy and merciless. I wanted to close the space, to hold her, to beg her to take back her words. But my legs felt nailed to the floor, my heart chained by disbelief. Neighbors passed outside. A car door slammed somewhere down the street. Life was moving on while mine was shattering into pieces that would never fit together again. I bent slowly, my hands trembling, and touched the suitcase. The metal zipper was cold, biting my skin. My reflection in the tiny silver lock looked like that of a ghost, hollow eyes, broken spirit. I wanted to scream. "I gave you my youth. I gave you my nights, my blood, my very breath. How dare you throw me away?" But the words died before reaching my lips. My silence screamed louder than my voice ever could. She turned her head, avoiding my eyes. Tears streaked her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them. Maybe she couldn't, maybe she didn't want to. And in that moment, I realized something that ripped me apart more than her words did. She wasn't just angry, she was done. This wasn't a fight. Fights end with slammed doors and shouted apologies. This was a fracture. A break. A shattering of a bond I once believed nothing could destroy. The suitcase sat between us, like a gravestone marking the death of us. And as the clock ticked past midnight, I understood. This night wasn't the beginning of the end. It was the end of everything I thought I knew. But if you really want to understand how a bond so sacred could bleed until it broke, you have to go back with me. Back to when California was still full of sunshine. Back to when her small hand clung to mine as if nothing in the world could tear us apart. Because this story doesn't start with the sound of a suitcase. It starts with the sound of laughter. California. The land of golden skis, palm trees that swayed like they were waving me in, and the kind of sunsets that painted hope across the horizon. When I first stepped off that bus, suitcase in one hand and my daughter's tiny fingers locked in the other, I thought the world was finally on my side. She was 5, small enough that her backpack looked bigger than her, but her smile, that was bigger than life itself. She looked up at me with those wide, curious eyes and whispered, "Mommy, is this our forever home?" I bent down, kissed her forehead and promised, "Yes, baby, this is where our story begins." Her laughter echoed across the street as she skipped ahead, her little shoes tapping against the pavement like drums of a celebration. Every sound was music. Every corner looked like possibility. We rented a tiny one-bedroom apartment above a bakery. The smell of fresh bread would creep into our windows every morning, and sometimes the baker would slip me a loaf for free when he saw the tired look on my face. I remember those days not by their struggles, but by their sweetness, the sound of her giggles as she played with pots and pans, pretending to cook dinner for her dolls, while I stood by the window, sketching dreams in the sky. Nights were hard, yes. I stitched clothes for neighbors, scrubbed floors in houses where nobody even knew my name. But when I came home, when she threw her little arms around my neck and whispered, "I missed you, Mommy," every blister on my hands felt like a medal of honor. We didn't have much, but we had us. And us was everything. The world outside could roar, but inside our small, warm home, we built a kingdom out of bedtime stories and lullabies. She would crawl into my lap, pressing her ear against my heart, and ask, "Why does it beat so fast, Mommy?" I smiled and told her the truth only mothers know. Because it only beats for you. Those were the days when love was simple, pure, unshakable. Or so I thought. Because even in the brightest gardens, shadows wait. And I never saw the storm. At first, the shadows came quietly. Not as storms, not as screams, but as whispers, so soft I almost ignored them. She was 10 the first time I felt the shift. I had packed her lunch, 2 peanut butter sandwiches cut into heart shapes, just the way she liked. But when she came home, the lunchbox was still full. She pushed it aside with a careless shrug. "We don't eat that at school anymore, Mom." Her voice wasn't cruel, not yet, but it carried something unfamiliar, distance. I laughed it off, but inside, a seed of fear planted itself. Soon, she no longer wanted bedtime stories. "I can read myself." No more hugs at the school gate. "Don't embarrass me, Mom." Each no was small, but together they stacked into walls I could not climb. One evening, I found her at the window, staring at the streetlights outside, headphones in her ears. I touched her shoulder gently, but she flinched, as if my hand carried fire. "Don't, Mom. I'm not a kid anymore." Not a kid anymore. But she was still my baby. My baby who once begged me to hold her hand through nightmares. My baby who once slipped drawings under my pillow that said, "I love you." The apartment above the bakery no longer smelled of fresh bread and laughter. It smelled of silence, heavy and bitter. Nights grew longer. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the clock, waiting for her to come home. Sometimes she did late, her perfume mixed with smoke and places I didn't know. I'd ask softly, "Where were you?" Her answer was always the same, cold, sharp. "Out, why do you care?" Why do I care? Because every breath in my lungs belongs to you. Because my entire existence is stitched together with your name. But I swallowed those words. Mothers always do. There were still moments of light, tiny flickers. Like the time she smiled at me across the table, and for a second I saw the little girl she used to be. But just as quickly, the smile faded, swallowed by shadows. It was like watching the sun set slowly, knowing night was coming, but unable to stop it. And deep down, a voice whispered, "This distance is not temporary. This silence is not harmless. This is the beginning of something that will break you." But I ignored it. Because how could I believe that the same child whose heartbeat once echoed against mine could ever push me away? Eeping in. The storm didn't arrive with lightning. It crept in slowly, like a draft under a locked door, chilling the house long before I realized I was freezing. Our home, once filled with laughter and bedtime stories, now echoed with slammed doors, muffled music, and the constant buzz of her phone. Conversations shrank into fragments. "Where are you going?" "Out." "When will you be back?" "Don't wait up." Her words weren't answers. They were daggers, sharp and final. One night I cooked her favorite meal, chicken curry with extra spice, the way she used to beg for when she was younger. The smell filled the kitchen, rich and warm. I thought maybe, just maybe, food could bridge what words no longer could. She sat down, earphones still in, scrolling through her phone. The clatter of her fork against the plate was louder than any conversation between us. "How was school today?" I asked gently. No reply, just chewing, just silence. "Did you finish your project?" Her eyes flicked up for half a second. "Mom, can you not?" 3 words, that's all she gave me. 3 words that felt heavier than stones. I forced a smile, but inside my chest caved. My voice, once her lullaby, had become noise she couldn't bear to hear. It happened on a rainy evening. The sky outside roared with thunder, as if it knew a war was about to erupt inside our walls. She came home late, again. Her hair damp, her jacket smelling of perfume that wasn't hers. I stood in the hallway, trembling but determined. "Where have you been?" She rolled her eyes. "Not this again. Answer me, it's past midnight." She snapped. Her voice, sharp and cutting, bounced off the walls. "I'm not a kid anymore. Stop treating me like one." The thunder outside cracked, but her words were louder. I wanted to hold her, to make her understand that my questions weren't control, they were love. Desperate, choking love. But my love was a language she no longer spoke. I raised my voice too, words tumbling out like broken glass. "You think I'm your enemy. I gave up my life for you, I crossed oceans for you, and this is how you treat me." Her eyes glistened, anger, hurt, maybe both. And then she whispered, almost too soft to hear. "Maybe I didn't ask you to." Those words didn't just cut, they killed. That night, after she slammed her bedroom door, I collapsed onto the kitchen floor. My hands shook as I pressed them against my face, muffling the sobs that tore out of me. The clock ticked. The rain tapped against the window like fingers reminding me that time was slipping away. I stared at the photo on the wall, her first day of kindergarten. Her smile, missing teeth, messy hair, arms wrapped tight around my neck. I whispered to that photo, to that frozen memory. "Come back, please come back to me." But walls don't answer. Photos don't hug back. And the child in that picture, she was gone. The fights became more frequent. Words weren't spoken, they were thrown like knives. Me, "I just want to protect you." Her, "From what? From living my life." Me, "From making mistakes you can't undo." Her, "Maybe I want to make them." Each fight left scars, not on skin, but on the fragile threads of our bond. Threads I could feel snapping one by one. The neighbors started noticing. Mrs. Alvarez from downstairs would glance at me with pity when she heard the yelling through the thin walls. I hated it. I hated that our love story, once so beautiful, was now just noise for others to gossip about. One evening, as I folded laundry, she came in, eyes red, lips trembling. For a fleeting second, I thought she was going to apologize, that maybe the storm had passed. Instead, she said quietly, "Mom, you're suffocating me." Suffocating. The word echoed like a curse. I wanted to scream. "I'm not suffocating you, I'm holding you. I'm keeping you safe." But I said nothing. Because deep down, I feared she was already slipping away. That night I couldn't sleep. The rain had stopped, but inside me the storm raged on. I walked into her room while she slept, her chest rising and falling softly. For a moment she looked like my little girl again, peaceful, innocent. I brushed her hair back from her forehead and whispered, "I don't know how to love you without losing you." The truth was clear now. This wasn't just teenage rebellion. This was something deeper, darker. Something that would end with a suitcase on the floor and a heart split in two. The night was too quiet. Not peaceful quiet, but heavy, suffocating quiet. The kind of silence that presses against your chest until every breath feels stolen. I sat at the edge of the couch, the lamp flickering behind me, casting shadows that swayed across the walls. My hands were folded in my lap, but they trembled so badly I had to clutch them together like I was holding on to the last pieces of myself. The clock ticked, 11:47 p.m. She wasn't home yet, again. Outside, the California night hummed with life, cars speeding down the freeway, laughter from a distant bar, music from a neighbor's window. The world was alive. But my world was dying. I tried distracting myself, flipping through an old photo album on my lap. Her baby pictures smiled up at me, gap-toothed grins, chocolate-stained cheeks, tiny hands clutching mine. Each photo was a weapon now, stabbing me with memories of who she used to be. I whispered to the empty room, Where did she go? Where did my baby go? The front door creaked open. My body stiffened, heartbeat hammering against my ribs like fists on a locked door. She walked in, phone in her hand, hair messy from the wind, jacket hanging loose from her shoulders. Her eyes flicked at me briefly before landing back on her glowing screen. No hello, no smile. I swallowed hard, my voice barely above a whisper. You're late. She shrugged, tossing her bag onto the floor with a dull thud. So what? Her words sliced, casual, cold, indifferent. I stood, forcing strength into my tone. So what? Do you know what it's like to sit here night after night, wondering if you're safe? Do you know what it does to me? She rolled her eyes, the gesture dripping with contempt. God, Mom, you're so dramatic. Dramatic. The word echoed in my head. Cruel and mocking. If only she knew that my entire life was stitched with sacrifices she never saw. If only she knew that my drama was nothing but a mother's fear. I clenched my fists, fighting the tears rising in my throat. Not tonight, I told myself. Don't cry tonight. She won't see you break. But deep down, I felt it. The air had shifted. The silence wasn't silence anymore. It was the calm before the impact. The rain had started again, soft at first, like fingertips drumming against the window. I stood in the kitchen, my back pressed against the counter, watching her move around the living room. She wasn't moving with purpose, just packing, scrolling, sighing, tossing her hair back. Every gesture screamed restlessness. The air between us was sharp, like glass about to shatter. I tried once more, my voice calm but shaking at the edges. Did you eat? I made dinner your favorite. She didn't even look up. I'm not hungry. Not hungry, always not hungry. The food on the table, still warm, felt like a reminder of my uselessness. My efforts invisible, my love unwanted. I pressed again, a little firmer this time. At least sit with me. We haven't talked all week. That was when she snapped her head up, eyes blazing. Because there's nothing to talk about, Mom. Her voice was sharp, but underneath it was something else. Pain, maybe. Or was I just imagining it? I stepped forward, desperate. There's everything to talk about. We're falling apart, don't you see that? She let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. No, Mom, you're falling apart, not me. The words struck like lightning. Not us, not we. You. It was no longer our problem. It was my weakness. My chest tightened, but anger surged to the surface. Years of exhaustion, of sleepless nights, of silent tears, all boiled up at once. Do you think this is easy for me? Do you think I wanted this life? Every single thing I did for you. She threw her phone onto the couch, her hands flying up in frustration. And I never asked you to. You chose it, you chose me. Don't throw it in my face now. My breath caught. Those words again. The same ones that had haunted me since the first time she said them. I never asked you to. The room spun. The lamp flickered again, throwing her face into half-light, half-shadow, as if even the house couldn't decide who she had become. I whispered, broken. All I wanted was to keep you safe. Her reply was a scream that shook the walls. Safe, I'm not living, Mom. I'm suffocating. You're the reason I can't breathe in my own house. The rain outside lashed harder, matching the storm inside. My knees went weak, but I gripped the counter to steady myself. She glared at me, chest heaving, tears pooling but refusing to fall. Her fists clenched at her sides like she was holding back more than words. I felt it in that moment. The spark had caught fire. The blaze was coming. And I was about to burn. Her scream tore through the room, before I even saw it coming. I can't do this anymore. She stormed past me, her footsteps pounding like thunder across the wooden floor. She yanked the closet door open, hands trembling with fury, and pulled down my suitcase. For a second, I thought she was bluffing, that this was just another teenage tantrum. But then... thud. The suitcase hit the floor so hard the walls seemed to shake. The sound wasn't just noise, it was a death sentence. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. My heart beat so violently I thought it would rip through my chest. She threw it open, clothes spilling from the top shelf, and began shoving my belongings inside. Shirts, scarves, the sweater she once knitted for me in art class, everything tossed like trash, each piece of fabric cutting me deeper than knives. You want to know the truth, Mom. You're the problem, you're holding us back. You're holding me back, just move out. Her voice cracked on the last words, but the damage was already done. The air in the room turned heavy, unbreathable. I staggered forward, my arms outstretched like a beggar reaching for mercy. Stop, please stop. You don't mean that. But she didn't stop. Her hands kept working, faster, angrier, shoving my life into that suitcase as if she was burying me alive. Yes, I mean it. I can't breathe with you here. Every time I walk into this house, it feels like a cage. And you're the bars. Cage, bars, prison. That's what I had become to her. Not a mother, not a protector. A jailer. I sank to my knees, my palms pressed against the cold floor. My body shook violently, tears blurring the scene in front of me. This isn't real. This isn't happening. This can't be happening. I whispered, my voice barely audible. I gave you everything. How can you throw me away like this? She paused for half a second, her chest heaving, her eyes wet with unshed tears. For the briefest moment, I saw my little girl again, the one who used to cling to me in fear of thunderstorms. But just as quickly, the softness vanished. She zipped the suitcase shut with a sharp, final pull. The sound sliced through me like a blade. It wasn't just the sound of a zipper. It was the sound of a bond breaking. She pushed the suitcase toward me, her hands trembling, her voice breaking even as she forced it out. You want the truth. You don't belong here anymore. The room spun. My ears rang. My heart shattered into pieces too sharp to hold. And in that moment, I realized. This wasn't just a fight. This was the death of us. The suitcase sat between us, silent and heavy, like a gravestone. And I was the ghost mourning my own life. I couldn't move. My knees pressed into the floor, my palms flat against the wood, but I felt like I was sinking into quicksand. The room swayed around me, but all I could hear was her voice, echoing in my head like a curse. You don't belong here anymore. Do you know what it feels like to die while still breathing? To feel your chest rise and fall, but to know your heart has already stopped. That was me. I looked at her, my daughter, my baby. The child I once cradled against my chest, whose every tear I kissed away, whose every nightmare I fought off with lullabies. And now she stood there, taller than me, stronger than me, shoving me out of the very life I built for her. I wanted to scream, to shake her shoulders until she remembered who I was. I'm your mother. I'm your home. Don't throw me away like yesterday's garbage. But the words tangled in my throat, strangled by grief. So instead, my mind screamed where my lips could not. I carried you for 9 months, through sickness and hunger, through nights when I thought I wouldn't make it. I tore my body open to bring you into this world. Do you even know the pain of that? Do you know that my first sound after labor wasn't my own cry, but yours? And that cry became my reason to live. I gave up my youth, my dreams, my freedom. Every job I worked, every meal I skipped, every tear I hid, it was all for you. And now you tell me I'm holding you back. My chest heaved as silent sobs ripped through me. My tears dripped onto the suitcase, staining the fabric like raindrops on a coffin. Do you think I wanted this? Do you think I dreamed of living paycheck to paycheck, stitching clothes in the dead of night so you could have shoes for school? Do you think I wanted to wake up every day exhausted, just to come home and be told I wasn't enough? My eyes blurred, but through the haze I saw her, arms crossed, jaw clenched, eyes avoiding mine. And in that moment, the cruelest truth cut through me. She didn't hate me. She resented me. And maybe she didn't need me anymore. That thought broke me more than her words ever could. I pressed my hand to my chest, feeling the frantic beat of my heart. Why does it still beat when it has nothing left to live for? I whispered into the empty air. But no answer came. Only silence. only the sound of rain outside, mocking me with its steady rhythm. The suitcase between us wasn't just luggage. It was a coffin, and inside it, she had buried me. No footsteps, no voices, no hum of laughter, no clatter of dishes in the kitchen. Just silence, thick, suffocating silence that wrapped itself around me like a noose. The suitcase sat there, half-packed, half-abandoned. Its presence poisoned the air. Every time my eyes flicked to it, I felt the sting again. A reminder, you're not wanted here. I sank onto the couch, the same couch where I had once read her bedtime stories, where she used to curl up against me, drifting to sleep in the safety of my arms. Now it felt cold, foreign, a stranger's couch in a stranger's house. My chest rose and fell with shallow breaths, each inhale shaky, each exhale heavier than the last. I tried to cry, but my body was too drained, too hollow. Tears wouldn't come anymore, only numbness. The rain outside tapped against the window. Each drop echoed like a metronome, counting down the end of something sacred. For the first time in my life, I felt invisible. Like a ghost wandering through the ruins of her own home. I stood slowly, my legs weak, and walked toward her room. The door was slightly ajar, and inside I could hear her muffled sobs. She was crying too. For a moment, hope flickered inside me. Maybe this was her breaking point. Maybe she would run out, throw her arms around me, and whisper, "I didn't mean it, Mom. Please don't leave." I pressed my palm to the doorframe, my heart beating fast, listening, waiting, praying. But the sobs didn't turn into apologies. They turned into silence. And then, the sound of music, her headphones blasting, drowning out everything, even me. She had locked herself away not just behind her door, but behind walls I could no longer climb. My hand dropped limply to my side. I turned back toward the suitcase. The sight of it mocked me, its zipper closed tight, as if sealing the fate I hadn't chosen. It wasn't just a bag of clothes. It was my exile. I knelt before it, fingers grazing the handle, and whispered, "Is this really it? After everything, this is how it ends." The suitcase, of course, said nothing. But in its silence, I heard everything. The truth, the rejection, the death of the bond I thought unbreakable. I dragged myself back to the couch, curling into a small, fragile ball. I stared at the ceiling, its cracks suddenly deeper, uglier, like scars etched into the house itself. And then, for the first time since the fight, the tears returned. Hot, relentless, merciless. They burned my cheeks, soaking into the cushion. My sobs filled the silence that had strangled me, but they brought no relief. I cried for her. I cried for me. I cried for the family we used to be. Somewhere deep down, I knew this wasn't just the aftermath of a fight. It was the end of a chapter. But what terrified me most was the question that echoed louder than her scream, louder than the suitcase hitting the floor, louder than my own sobs. What happens now? The night dragged on like a cruel punishment. Sleep wouldn't come. My eyes closed, but my mind dragged me backward, into the memories I had buried under layers of strength and survival. Because isn't that what mothers do? We bury our pain, so our children never see it. But tonight, everything surfaced. I remembered the first winter, after she was born. The heater had broken, and the house was an icebox. I wrapped her in every blanket we owned, holding her tiny body against my chest, rocking her for hours so she wouldn't shiver. My hands were numb, my lips blue, but I whispered over and over, "It's okay, baby. Mommy's here. Mommy's warm enough for both of us." I didn't tell her that I spent the entire night awake, teeth chattering, praying her little body wouldn't freeze in my arms. Another memory bled through. She was 6. She wanted a pair of glittery shoes she saw in a shop window. Her eyes lit up like stars when she pressed her nose against the glass. The shoes were too expensive. I knew it the second I saw the price tag, but how could I say no to that sparkle in her eyes? So I said yes. That night I skipped dinner. For a week, I ate stale bread and watered-down soup. Every growl of my stomach was worth it when she twirled in those shoes the next morning, beaming like she owned the world. She never knew the cost. She only knew joy. And that was enough for me. Then came the nights of working double shifts. I'd come home at 2 a.m., my body aching, my back screaming, my eyes so heavy I could barely keep them open. But when I peeked into her room and saw her asleep, clutching her stuffed rabbit, my exhaustion melted. I whispered into the darkness, "This is for you, baby. Every hour, every drop of sweat, it's all for you." And I'd collapse into bed, knowing I'd do it all over again tomorrow. But not all sacrifices were so simple. Some cut deeper. There was a man once, a good man. He loved me. He wanted to marry me. He said he'd take care of us. But I looked at my daughter, so small, so fragile, and I said no. Because his love came with conditions. He wanted me, but he didn't want the baggage of a child. So I let him go. I let myself go. I chose her, always her. The flashbacks came faster, hitting like waves. Her first fever, when I sat by her bed all night, wiping her forehead with cold cloths. The school play, when I clapped louder than anyone, even though my uniform smelled of grease from the diner shift I rushed from. The birthdays where the cake was small, but my love was enormous. Every memory was a sacrifice, stitched into the fabric of her life. And now she had the audacity to say I was holding her back. I pressed my hands to my face, sobbing into the night. Does she know I starved so she could eat, that I broke so she could be whole, that I bled so she could dream? But she didn't know. And maybe she never would. Because children don't remember the nights their mothers stayed up till dawn, counting coins to pay bills. They don't remember the hunger, the tears, the loneliness. They only see the cracks, the rules, the fears, the warnings we give to protect them. They don't see that those cracks were built from sacrifice. The clock ticked past 3 a.m., the rain still whispered against the window. And I sat there, drowning in my own memories, whispering into the silence. I gave her everything, and she still thinks I'm nothing. The words hung in the air, heavier than the storm outside. And in that moment, the cruelest question tore through me. Was love not enough? The storm outside had softened, but inside me, a hurricane was tearing everything apart. I stared at the suitcase across the room, its shadow stretching long and dark in the dim light. That bag had become my executioner. With every passing second, its silent presence screamed louder. Leave, leave, leave. Something inside me snapped. I rose to my feet, trembling, my breath ragged. My fists clenched so tightly my nails dug crescents into my palms. My chest burned, not with grief anymore, but with fire. And then I screamed. A scream that clawed its way out of my lungs, raw and feral, echoing off the walls like an animal in pain. My voice cracked, broke, and shattered, but I didn't care. It wasn't just a sound. It was every buried night, every silenced sob, every swallowed word exploding at once. Do you know what I gave up for you? Do you even know? The walls shook with my voice. The house, once silent, now trembled with rage and heartbreak. I paced like a madwoman, clutching my head, pulling at my hair. The memories I had just relived now poured out of me like poison I could no longer contain. I starved so you could eat. I froze so you could sleep warm. I broke my body to keep a roof over your head. And this is how you repay me. By throwing me away, by telling me I'm the prison. My voice cracked, turning hoarse, but the storm inside me only grew. I gave up love. I gave up a future. I gave up myself for you. And now you look at me like I'm nothing but dead weight. I slammed my fists against the wall, the impact stinging my bones. Tears blurred my vision, streaming unchecked, dripping from my chin. The door to her room stayed closed, silent, unmoved. That silence fueled me, twisting the knife deeper. Do you think I wanted this life? Do you think I dreamed of being alone, exhausted, forgotten? I carried you. I raised you. I became mother and father, warrior and provider. And now I'm disposable. My body shook violently, my sobs tearing through me like blades. I collapsed to my knees, pounding the floor with both fists until my arms gave out. And then, quiet. My voice was gone. My strength was gone. All that remained was a hollow shell of me, kneeling in the wreckage of my own heart. I pressed my forehead against the cold floor, whispering into the emptiness, barely audible. All I ever wanted was to be enough. The words left my lips like a prayer, or maybe a curse. I lifted my head slowly, my eyes swollen, my body weak, and for the first time in years I didn't recognize myself. The woman in the reflection of the window wasn't strong, wasn't resilient. She was broken, cracked beyond repair. And yet, in that brokenness, a terrifying clarity rose. If love could be thrown away this easily, maybe I truly didn't belong here anymore. The thought chilled me to the bone. But it also planted something else, something dangerous. A seed of resolve. A whisper that maybe the story wasn't over. The morning light crept in slowly, like an uninvited guest. Golden beams filtered through the curtains, but instead of warmth, they brought only a sharp reminder. Another day had begun. I hadn't slept. My eyes were swollen, my body limp, my soul hollow. The night storm had drained me, but the silence that followed felt even heavier. The house was too quiet. Not peaceful, never peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that screamed. I sat on the edge of the couch, staring at nothing. My hands rested on my knees, trembling slightly, my mind replaying the night on an endless loop. The scream, the suitcase hitting the floor, her words cutting through me like jagged glass. You don't belong here anymore. Those 5 words echoed in every corner of the room, louder than the birds chirping outside, louder than the faint hum of cars on the street. I rubbed my temples, trying to chase them away, but they clung to me, sticky and cruel. The suitcase still sat in the corner, half-packed, its zipper closed, its presence suffocating. It looked almost smug, as if waiting for me to pick it up and walk out. I turned my face away. I couldn't look at it anymore. From down the hall, I heard a door creak softly. My heart jumped. Her door. I froze, listening. Her footsteps were light, hesitant. For a second, I thought she might come toward me, that maybe she had changed her mind, that maybe she would whisper the words I had prayed for all night. I'm sorry, Mom. But the steps turned away. Toward the kitchen. I heard the fridge door open, the clink of a glass, the sound of water being poured. Every small noise was amplified in the suffocating silence between us. I wanted to stand, to walk in there, to see her face, to reach across the chasm that had opened between us. But I didn't move. I was rooted to the couch, paralyzed by fear. What if she looked at me with the same fire as last night? What if she repeated those words, cold and final? What if the little hope I had left was crushed entirely? So I sat still, like a coward, tears prickling behind my tired eyes. After a moment, her footsteps retreated. The door shut again, and just like that, the silence returned, louder than ever. I stood slowly, my body heavy as if carrying stones. My feet dragged across the floor as I made my way to the window. Outside, the world was alive. Children ran down the street, laughing on their way to school. Neighbors walked their dogs, sipping coffee from paper cups. A mailman tossed envelopes into boxes with casual rhythm. Life, normal, ordinary life. And here I stood, broken, invisible, watching through glass, as if the world belonged to everyone but me. I pressed my palm against the window pane. It was cool against my skin, grounding me in a way nothing else could. And then the cruelest thought slipped in. The world doesn't care. My grief, my tears, my shattered bond, they don't stop the sun from rising. I sank against the wall, sliding down until I was sitting on the floor, my knees pulled to my chest. The morning light washed over me, harsh and unforgiving. Every shadow in the room seemed to whisper my failures, every golden ray exposing the cracks I had tried so hard to hide. For a moment, I wished the night had never ended. At least in the darkness, I could pretend. In the daylight, there was no escape. I turned my head toward the suitcase again. It sat there patient, waiting. And in that silence, the question burned inside me. Is today the day I leave? My throat tightened, my chest heavy with the weight of it. But I didn't answer, not yet, because even though morning had come, I was still trapped in the endless night of her words. The hours crawled by. The morning light shifted across the floor, inch by inch, like time mocking me with its steady march forward. I sat by the window, knees pulled to my chest, watching a world that no longer felt like mine. Across the street, Mrs. Alvarez watered her flowers, humming to herself. She bent carefully, adjusting the stems, her hands gentle as though the roses could feel her touch. Her face glowed with the ease of someone whose world hadn't just collapsed. A delivery truck rumbled past, the driver whistling a tune I couldn't place. He tossed a package onto a doorstep, hopped back into his cab and drove away, untouched, unshaken. Teenagers laughed as they biked down the block, their voices carrying in the crisp air. A little boy chased after his dog, his mother calling out for him not to run too far. Life. It just kept going. My hands tightened around my legs. I pressed my chin to my knees, tears stinging again. How cruel that the earth didn't pause, that the sky still turned blue, that the birds still sang, that the neighborhood still moved as if nothing had happened. Didn't the world know my heart had been shattered? Didn't it hear the echo of my daughter's words ricocheting in my skull? Didn't it see me drowning right here, behind this window? But no, the world didn't care. It never does. I forced myself up and staggered into the kitchen. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second a reminder that time was moving on, even if I was. The sink was full of dishes from last night, plates smeared with sauce, glasses half filled with water, evidence of a dinner that had ended in disaster. I picked up a plate, staring at the remnants of food she hadn't finished. My chest tightened. How many meals had I made for her? How many times had I gone hungry just so she could eat? Now even her leftovers mocked me. I slammed the plate into the sink, the sound echoing through the empty house. I wandered back to the living room. My body moved, but my mind was somewhere else. I thought about all the mornings before this one, how routine they used to feel. Wake up, make breakfast, remind her about homework, argue over something trivial, then send her off with a kiss. Back then, I thought those mornings would last forever. I thought motherhood was a permanent role, etched into my identity. But now I felt like an unpaid guest in my own story. The kettle whistled faintly on the stove. I hadn't even remembered turning it on. I poured myself a cup of tea, but when I lifted it to my lips, the taste was bitter. I set it down untouched. Everything tasted bitter now. I returned to the window, unable to stop myself from watching the street. The world moved in patterns, ordinary, predictable, comforting to everyone but me. A neighbor's child waved as he passed by, his small hand bright against the sun. I lifted mine weakly in return, forcing a smile I didn't feel. The boy kept walking, his laughter fatting down the street. And then the silence pressed back in. I leaned my head against the cool glass, my voice a whisper only I could hear. Doesn't anyone see me? Doesn't anyone notice I'm falling apart? But no one turned. No one looked. Because the world doesn't pause for broken hearts. It doesn't bend for mothers left behind. It doesn't mourn what it doesn't know it has lost. The realization hollowed me out, leaving me emptier than before. I pulled the curtain shut, blocking out the view. If the world wouldn't notice me, then I wouldn't watch it either. I sat back down on the couch, the suitcase still in the corner, the silence pressing closer. And deep inside, a thought whispered again, louder this time. If the world can move on without me, maybe I need to move on too. The day dragged on in heavy silence. Every tick of the clock was like a hammer striking the walls of my chest. The suitcase still sat in the corner, shadowed, quiet, yet louder than anything else in the house. It stared at me, accusing, demanding. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I walked over, each step trembling, as though the carpet itself were made of glass. My hand hovered above the handle, shaking. The memory hit me, her voice sharp and final. "You're holding us back. Move out." I flinched as if struck again. My fingers curled into a fist instead of grasping the handle. I sank to the floor beside it, my back against the wall. My breathing came shallow, my pulse pounding in my ears. Images flooded my mind, like a film reel unraveling too fast. Her first steps, tiny and uncertain, stumbling toward me as I held out my hands. Her school days, me cheering from the sidelines, my throat sore from yelling her name. Her late-night tears, when the world was cruel and I was her only shelter. And now this. Thrown out by the same child I had once carried in my arms. The pain was unbearable, a raw wound that refused to close. My inner voice began its cruel debate. Stay. Stay because love doesn't walk away. Stay because she's still your daughter, even if her words cut like knives. Stay because mothers don't quit. But then another voice. Go. Go because she doesn't want you here. Go because your worth is not defined by her rejection. Go because maybe, just maybe, freedom waits on the other side of this door. Two voices, tearing me apart. Both right, both wrong. Both demanding I choose. I pressed my palms over my face, sobbing silently. My shoulders shook as though the grief itself wanted to break free from my body. What did I do wrong? I whispered into the empty room. The walls gave no answer. At some point I rose. My movements felt robotic, detached. I pulled the suitcase from the corner and set it upright. The wheels scraped softly against the floor. The sound was deafening. I gripped the handle this time. My knuckles whitened. My body trembled with the weight of the decision that pressed down on me. I dragged the suitcase to the middle of the room and stopped. My breath caught in my throat. One step forward, and my life would change forever. One step back, and I'd remain chained to this endless cycle of pain. I looked around the room, at the pictures on the wall, at the faint smell of her shampoo lingering in the hallway, at the very space that once felt like home. Now it felt like a prison. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to imagine both futures. If I stayed, she would resent me more. The walls would echo with anger instead of love. I would shrink smaller and smaller until I disappeared. If I left, she might hate me, she might never call, but maybe, just maybe, I would find myself again. I closed my eyes, tears streaking hot down my face. My chest ached with the weight of the unknown. Then, like a whisper through the silence, I heard my own voice inside me, soft but steady. You have survived everything until now. You can survive this too. I exhaled sharply. My hand tightened around the suitcase handle. And then footsteps. Her footsteps. Faint but unmistakable, moving across the hallway upstairs. I froze. My heart slammed against my ribs. Would she come down? Would she stop me? Would she apologize? The footsteps faded. The silence returned. No apology. No embrace. Just distance. The decision was clear. Or maybe it was. Because the truth was, I had lifted the suitcase, but I hadn't yet crossed the door. I stood there, trembling, trapped between past and future, love and loss, staying and leaving. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about one choice. This was about my entire life. The suitcase wasn't just a bag. It was a mirror. And in its reflection, I saw a woman who had to decide if she was ready to let go. I let out one final, broken whisper. What hurts more, leaving her or losing myself? The question hung in the air, unanswered. And with that, the scene ended, not with resolution but with suspense. Because some decisions take more than one night to make. The house was silent, but inside my chest, storms raged on. I stood in the center of the room, suitcase in hand, heart caught between gravity and flight. The walls seemed to breathe with me, exhaling sorrow, inhaling fear. The air smelled of endings. Yet somewhere, faint and fragile, was the scent of beginnings too. I looked at the photographs lining the shelf, smiles frozen in time, birthdays, school plays, summer picnics, a gallery of a life I thought was unshakable. But every frame now felt like a lie. Because smiles can fade. Because bonds can break. Because even love can be weaponized. I closed my eyes, and in the darkness I saw two roads. One, familiar, filled with shadows of yesterday, chains of guilt, the heavy silence of a house that no longer felt like home. The other, unknown, vast, terrifying, unlit, but alive with the possibility of something new. And somewhere deep inside, a whisper stirred. A whisper I had buried for years under duty, sacrifice, and silence. You were not born only to suffer. You were born to live. My fingers tightened around the handle of the suitcase. I felt the grooves of the plastic, cold and rough, like reality itself. For the first time, I didn't feel like a prisoner of that bag. I felt like its owner. Like maybe, just maybe, it was carrying me toward freedom instead of exile. A single tear slid down my cheek, but this one felt different. Not heavy, not bitter, almost cleansing. The silence around me no longer felt suffocating. It felt like a pause. A breath before the leap. I whispered into the empty room. This is not the end. This is the beginning of the woman I was always meant to be. The lights outside flickered on as night fell. The world kept turning, oblivious to my decision, yet somehow I felt aligned with its rhythm again. I wasn't ready to step out the door tonight. But I knew I would. Soon. And when I did, I wouldn't just be walking away from this house. I would be walking toward myself. The camera would linger on the suitcase in my grip, the faint quiver in my lips, the fire flickering in my eyes. And just before the screen faded to black, my voice would echo, firm, steady, unshakable. You threw me out of your world, but you also pushed me back into my own. The house had never been so quiet. It wasn't the kind of quiet that brought peace, it was the kind that screamed. The silence filled every hallway, every corner, every fragile piece of my heart. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring into the darkness. The clock's red digits glowed. 11:47 p.m. Time was dragging its feet, refusing to let me sleep, forcing me to sit with the wreckage of my own thoughts. The bed felt colder than usual, the blanket heavy, almost suffocating. My body lay on one side, but the emptiness on the other side of the mattress mocked me. Once, that space had been filled with late-night visits from my daughter, when storms scared her, or when nightmares chased her into my arms. She used to curl against me like a fragile bird, seeking safety in my warmth. Now that same warmth was useless. Unwanted. I tried closing my eyes, but every time I did, her face appeared. Not the face of the little girl, who clung to me in playgrounds, or whispered secrets into my ear. But the face from earlier, the angry glare, the sharp tongue, the venom in her words. You're holding us back, move out. I flinched, my chest tightening as if the words had been carved into my ribs. I clutched the blanket against my chest, rocking slightly, as though I could soothe myself the way I used to soothe her. But mothers rarely learn how to cradle themselves. The ceiling fan spun lazily above me, its rhythm steady, hypnotic, but it couldn't drown out the voices in my head. One whispered regret, maybe I should have done better, maybe I failed her, maybe this is all my fault. Another whispered bitterness, after everything I gave, everything I sacrificed, this is what I get. The war inside me raged louder than any storm outside. I buried my face into the pillow, muffling my sobs. The cotton soaked up my tears, but it couldn't absorb the ache in my bones. Midnight came, then 1:00 a.m. The house stayed silent, except for the occasional creak of settling wood. Every sound felt amplified in the emptiness. I found myself wandering into the hallway, my footsteps soft, hesitant. The door to her room was shut, but the memory of it wide open played in my head. I reached for the handle, my fingers hovered, trembling. I wanted to knock. I wanted to push the door open and crawl beside her like I used to. I wanted to beg her to take her words back, to tell me it was just anger, not truth. But I didn't. Instead, I rested my forehead against the wood, whispering, "Do you hate me that much?" No answer. Only silence. Back in my room, I tried again to sleep. The minutes crawled, the shadows shifted, and my body ached with exhaustion. But sleep wouldn't come, not when grief held my eyelids open. So I did what I hadn't done in years. I prayed. Not to any god in particular, just to the universe, to the night, to whoever or whatever might be listening. Please just give me strength. If not for her, then for me. The words cracked in my throat, fragile and desperate. By 3:00 a.m., I sat by the window. The moonlight spilled across the floor, painting everything in silver. The city beyond was asleep, but I was awake, a ghost haunting my own home. I thought of the first night I ever held her. The hospital room. Her tiny fingers curling instinctively around mine. The overwhelming rush of love that had nearly broken me with its intensity. Back then I had promised her, silently, fiercely, that I would never let her go. That I would fight for her, protect her, love her, no matter what. Now, sitting in that dark room, I realized that maybe keeping that promise meant something different. Maybe it meant letting her push me away. Maybe it meant protecting her by leaving. The thought gutted me, but it also lit a tiny spark inside me. By dawn, my eyes were swollen, my body trembling with fatigue, but something had shifted in me. The silence was still here, the pain was still sharp, the bed was still cold. But underneath it all, I felt a seed. A fragile, tiny seed of something I hadn't felt in years. Strength. It wasn't enough to save me yet, but it was enough to keep me breathing, enough to make me whisper to myself as the sun rose. If I survived this night, maybe, just maybe, I can survive tomorrow too. Morning came, but it didn't bring light. The sun peeked through the curtains, yet my room still felt like a cave, cold and damp with memories. My body ached, my eyes burned from the sleepless night, but my mind refused to rest. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, until the weight of the past dragged me down deeper than the mattress ever could. Flashback 1, the career that never was. Once upon a time, I had dreams. Not small ones, the kind that set your chest on fire. I wanted to teach, not just in classrooms, but on stages, in conferences, across borders. I wanted to shape minds, to leave my mark on the world. But then she came along, my miracle, my daughter. And just like that, dreams folded neatly into the back of a drawer, never to be opened again. I remember the day I turned down the offer. A university had sent me a letter, inviting me for an interview. My hands shook with excitement as I read it, imagining a life I had always longed for. But when I looked at her, tiny, fragile, needing me more than anything, I knew. I called them, voice steady but heart bleeding, and said, "I won't be coming." That was the first ghost. The ghost of the woman I might have been. Flashback 2, the ring that never shone. Love had knocked once too. A man with kind eyes and a laugh that could soften any storm. He wanted me. He wanted us. But I said no. Because how could I risk splitting her loyalty? How could I bring another presence into her fragile world? He proposed in a quiet cafe, sliding a ring across the table with trembling hands. I remember the way he whispered, "You don't have to do this alone." But I pushed the ring back, smiled with tears I couldn't stop, and whispered back, "Yes, I do." He left, and with him another version of me vanished, one who might have been loved as a woman, not just as a mother. That was the second ghost. The ghost of love unclaimed. Flashback 3, the nights of hunger. There were nights I went hungry so she could eat. I remember scraping the last bit of pasta onto her plate, watching her devour it while I drank water to fill the hollow ache inside me. I told myself it didn't matter, that mothers don't need full stomachs when their children are fed. But sometimes, lying awake at night, the growl of my stomach sounded like a scream only I could hear. And no one answered. That was the third ghost. The ghost of hunger, both physical and emotional. Flashback 4, the silence of dreams. I used to write poems, stories, pieces of myself scattered across pages. But notebooks turned into grocery lists. Pens turned into unpaid bills. Words dried up the way rivers do under merciless suns. She once asked me, "Mama, why don't you write any more?" I smiled and said, "Because I'd rather tell you stories." But the truth was, I had run out of space for myself. That was the fourth ghost. The ghost of creativity, buried alive. The weight of them all. As I sat there now, the daylight streaming across my face, the ghosts crowded the room. They whispered, they clawed, they wrapped themselves around me until I couldn't breathe. I had given everything, every choice bent toward her, every sacrifice carved out of my own flesh. And still, she told me I was holding her back. Wasn't love supposed to be enough? Wasn't sacrifice supposed to buy loyalty? I pressed my palms against my temples, rocking back and forth, my breath ragged. But then, in the middle of the storm, another voice whispered, not from outside, but from somewhere deep inside me. "You didn't just give up your life for her, you erased yourself." The words hit me like thunder. Maybe she resented me, not because I was too much, but because I had become too little. Too small. Too invisible. I had poured so much into her that I had disappeared. And maybe, just maybe, she had grown to hate the ghost of a mother she could no longer see. The thought was unbearable, but also liberating. Because if disappearing had broken me, then maybe reappearing could heal me. I wiped my tears with trembling hands, staring at my reflection in the mirror across the room. My face looked hollow, my eyes swollen, but beneath it all I saw her, the woman who once dreamed, once wrote, once wanted more. She was buried, yes, but not dead. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to dig her out. The walls were closing in. 2 days had crawled by since the storm. 2 days of silence, of shadows, of watching the suitcase like it was both a threat and a lifeline. I couldn't breathe in this house anymore. Every corner carried echoes of her voice. Every room held ghosts of who I had been. So I stepped outside. The air hit me like a shock, crisp, sharp, real. The world was alive in a way I had forgotten. The street hummed with energy, cars rushing by, children chasing balls, shopkeepers raising shutters. The scent of fresh bread drifted from a bakery down the block, mingling with the faint perfume of spring flowers blooming in neighbors' yards. It felt strange, almost foreign, like stepping into a movie set where everyone knew their lines except me. I walked slowly, unsure of where I was going. My body stiff, my steps uncertain, like a child learning to walk all over again. At the corner cafe, people laughed over steaming cups of coffee. A young woman tapped at her laptop, earphones tucked in, completely absorbed. A couple leaned close, their hands brushing, eyes glowing with a love so easy it felt unreal. I stood outside the glass window, staring in. For a moment, I wasn't invisible. For a moment, I was an outsider looking into a world I had forgotten existed. I pushed the door open. The bell chimed, and warmth wrapped around me. The smell of roasted beans, sugar, and cinnamon filled my lungs. I hadn't been in a cafe in years, not since before her. I ordered the smallest coffee they had, my voice trembling as though I was confessing a secret instead of ordering a drink. When the cup landed in my hands, hot and comforting, I almost cried. It wasn't just coffee, it was proof that I could choose something for myself again. I sat by the window, cupping the mug, watching the world move. My reflection stared back at me from the glass, tired, yes, but alive. For the first time in days, the tears that burned my eyes weren't just from pain. They were from the shock of feeling something else. Something like possibility. After finishing my coffee, I wandered further. The park wasn't far. The grass sparkled with dew, children shrieked with laughter as they swung and slid, dogs barked joyfully as their owners chased after them. I sat on a bench, letting the scene wash over me. Once I used to bring her here. She'd run wild, her hair flying behind her, her cheeks flushed with happiness. I'd watch, heart swelling, thinking, this is worth everything. The memory stung, but sitting here now, I realized something. The park was still here. The laughter was still here. Life hadn't stopped just because mine had cracked open. Maybe I could exist in this world again. Not just as a ghost, not just as a mother, but as me. I closed my eyes and let the sun warm my face. And in that moment, for the first time since she threw my suitcase, I didn't feel entirely broken. I felt fragile, yes, scarred, yes, but not destroyed. It was such a small shift, but it was everything. As I opened my eyes, I noticed a young girl, no older than 8, tugging her mother's hand. They passed by me, the girl laughing, the mother smiling softly as she adjusted her daughter's jacket. For a split second, envy stabbed me. That used to be me and her. That bond, that closeness, it had been mine once. But then, something else bloomed inside me. Hope. Because if love could exist there, maybe it could exist again. Maybe not with her, not now, maybe not ever, but somewhere, somehow. The wind brushed against my skin, almost like an embrace. And for the first time in so long, I whispered to myself, not in despair, but in wonder. I'm still here. The house was still. The kind of stillness that presses on your chest until breathing feels like work. I couldn't hold the silence anymore. My thoughts had nowhere to go, no one to hear them. So I pulled out an old notebook, the one I hadn't touched in years. The cover was worn, the edges curled, but it felt alive in my hands, like it had been waiting for me. I uncapped a pen, and without even thinking, the words began to spill. My daughter, I wrote, my hand trembling. Do you even know what you did to me that night? When you threw my suitcase, you didn't just push me out of your room. You pushed me out of the world I built around you. I didn't know how heavy silence could be until you gave me yours. The ink blurred as my tears hit the page, small dark circles spreading like wounds. I kept writing. Do you remember the nights I stayed awake, rocking you to sleep, singing lullabies until my voice cracked? Do you remember when you'd run into my arms after school, telling me stories faster than you could breathe? Where did that little girl go? Where did I lose you? My chest ached, but the words kept flowing. I gave up everything so you could have more. I let go of dreams I didn't even tell you about because I thought raising you was enough. I thought being your mother was the only identity I needed. But now, staring at these walls, I wonder, was it ever enough for you? I paused, staring at the half-written page, my pen hovering. The room was silent, except for the scratch of ink and the sound of my breath, shaky and uneven. Then I started again. I'm not angry, my love, not really. I'm broken, I'm scared. Because for the first time, I don't know where I fit in your life anymore. And maybe I never will again. The words sliced through me as I wrote them, but at the same time, they released me. Pages turned. Hours passed. Letter after letter poured out of me, each one a confession, a memory, a prayer. I missed the smell of your hair when you hugged me goodnight. I wish I could tell you how proud I am, even when you push me away. I'm sorry if my love ever felt like a cage. I'm sorry if I forgot to see the woman you're becoming, because I was clinging too tightly to the child you were. Each sentence felt like bleeding, but in the bleeding came relief. By the time I stopped, the notebook was heavy with ink and tears. My hand ached, my heart felt raw but lighter. I closed it gently, pressing my palm against the cover like sealing a secret. I knew I would never give her these letters. She wasn't ready. Maybe she never would be. But I was. I was ready to face myself, to finally admit that part of loving someone is letting your love exist quietly, even when it's not received. As I set the notebook on the nightstand, I whispered into the darkness. I still love you, always will, even if you never read a single word. And for the first time since she threw my suitcase, my tears felt healing. The letters sat quietly on the nightstand, a secret no one would ever read. But I had read them, every word, every tear-stained confession, and in those words I found something I hadn't expected, a mirror. For the first time in years, I saw myself, not just as a mother, not just as the woman who sacrificed, who gave, who lost, but as me. The silence of the house no longer crushed me. It was still heavy, yes, but it didn't suffocate. It felt different, like the quiet before dawn, empty, but full of promise. I stood at the window, watching the city lights flicker like scattered stars. Cars moved in the distance, Voices rose and fell. Life pulsed steadily, reminding me that I was still part of it if I chose to be. And for the first time, I whispered something I had been too afraid to say. This isn't the end of me. It startled me, hearing my own voice, steady, firm, almost unfamiliar. I repeated it, louder this time. This isn't the end of me. It rolled through the room, echoing against the walls that had witnessed my collapse. This wasn't about revenge. This wasn't about proving my daughter wrong. This was about something far bigger. Rebirth. I thought of the suitcase, the symbol of rejection. The sound of it hitting the floor still rang in my ears like a gunshot. But maybe, just maybe, that suitcase wasn't just an ending. Maybe it was a beginning. A door slammed shut, but another cracked open. I didn't know yet where it led. I didn't know who I would be when I walked through it. But I knew one thing: I would walk. I placed my hand on the notebook, feeling the weight of all those unsent letters, and smiled through my tears. One day, I whispered, she will know, she will see, and when that day comes, I want her to find me stronger than ever, not broken, not begging, but whole. The night wrapped itself around me like a cloak, but I didn't feel hidden anymore. I felt shielded. Tomorrow, I would step into the world again, not as a shadow of who I had been, not as someone waiting to be chosen, but as someone who was finally ready to choose herself. The suitcase still sat by the door untouched, a symbol, a reminder. But now, when I looked at it, I didn't see rejection. I saw freedom. And as I turned off the light and lay down in bed, one thought carried me into the darkness, steady and unstoppable. This is not revenge. This is rebirth. The phone rang. At first, I didn't move. It was late evening, the sky outside washed in deep purple, the kind of color that makes the world feel heavy. I was curled on the couch, the notebook of unsent letters resting on my lap, my pen still warm from words I had just spilled onto paper. The sound was so ordinary, so harmless, but something about it froze me. Because hardly anyone ever called me anymore. I let it ring once, twice. My heart began to race. By the third ring, I reached for it, almost against my will, like a moth drawn to flame. The screen glowed with a name that sent a jolt through every nerve in my body. Sir. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My daughter's name looked almost unreal, like a word I had forgotten how to read. I stared at it, hand trembling, thumb hovering over the green button. My pulse hammered in my ears. 1,000 questions stormed inside me. Why now? What does she want? Is she okay? Is she calling to apologize, or to cut me off forever? The phone kept vibrating, demanding an answer. I whispered to myself, voice shaking. Pick it up, just pick it up. I swiped. Hello. The word came out small, fragile, like it might shatter if I spoke louder. There was silence, a silence so sharp it hurt. I could hear faint breathing on the other end. Then her voice. Flat, tired, familiar. Mom. The sound of it broke me open. My knees went weak. I sank back onto the couch, gripping the phone as though it might vanish. Yes, I whispered, my throat closing. I'm here. Another pause, then a sigh, sharp, almost impatient. I didn't call to talk long. She stopped, like the words were caught in her throat. I just needed to tell you something. Every part of me leaned into the silence that followed, desperate, hungry. Finally, she spoke. They accepted me, the program in New York. Her words hit me like a blow. For a second, I didn't even understand. Program, New York. Then it sank in, she was leaving. Leaving this state, this city, maybe leaving me forever. That's wonderful, I managed, forcing the words past the lump in my throat. Yeah, she said flatly, no joy in her voice, no celebration. Only distance. I just thought you should know, she continued, her tone clipped. Before I go. The phrase stabbed me, like she was announcing not just a move, but a farewell. I wanted to scream, don't go, don't leave me like this. Don't let our last memory be the sound of a suitcase hitting the floor. But all that came out was, thank you for telling me. Silence again, heavier this time. I could hear her breathing, uneven. Could she hear mine, the way it shook? I almost blurted everything. The letters, the sleepless nights, the way I still whispered goodnight to her picture on the wall. But something inside me stopped me. This wasn't the time. Anyway, she said, clearing her throat, I should go. My chest clenched. No, not yet, not like this. Wait, I blurted, my voice cracked, desperate. Please, can we meet, just once before you leave? The silence that followed was suffocating. My heart pounded. I was terrified she'd hang up, that this tiny thread connecting us would snap. Finally, she answered. A single word. Maybe. Then the line went dead. I sat there, phone still pressed to my ear long after the call ended. The room spun, my breath ragged. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. But it wasn't goodbye either. And for now, that was enough to keep my heart beating. That night, I couldn't sleep. Her voice echoed inside me, every syllable carved into my bones. Mom! The way she said it, soft, guarded, almost reluctant, it replayed like a haunting lullaby. And then those two words that sliced me open. Before I go. The house was silent, but inside my head, a war raged. I stood in front of the mirror. The woman staring back at me didn't look like me anymore. Her eyes were swollen, her shoulders hunched, her mouth a permanent line of sorrow. But deeper than the reflection, I saw something worse. I saw the mother I had been. Flashbacks came, sharp and uninvited. Her teenage years, me hovering too close, checking her phone, questioning every late night. Who are you texting? Why didn't you answer my call? You don't understand now, but one day you'll thank me. I had said those words like shields, convincing myself they were love. But now, in the stillness, they sounded like chains. I remembered the first time she asked to go on a school trip. She was 12, full of excitement, her eyes sparkling as she handed me the form. And I had said no. Not because it was unsafe, not because it was wrong, but because the thought of her being out of my reach for even 2 nights terrified me. I masked my fear with rules, with warnings, with it's for your own good. Her face had fallen, and I told myself she'd understand someday. But maybe she never did. More memories stabbed through me. Her first crush. She had come home smiling, cheeks flushed, and I, instead of celebrating her joy, had scolded her, called her too young, too naive. I thought I was protecting her heart, but maybe I was just protecting my own fear of losing her. Every time she wanted space, I filled it with my presence. Every time she wanted freedom, I clipped her wings in the name of love. And now, she had cut the strings herself. I pressed my palms against the mirror, tears dripping down. Was it my fault? I whispered. The silence answered me louder than words. The letters I had written earlier called out to me from the nightstand. I flipped them open, scanning the words. Please, memories, apologies. But what was missing was the hardest truth. I hadn't just been a victim of her rejection. I had been a participant in the breaking of our bond. The realization burned, but it also freed me. Because if I had played a part in the fracture, maybe, just maybe, I could play a part in the healing. I sat on the floor, pulling out a fresh page. For the first time, I didn't write to her. I wrote to myself. I see you, the mother who tried so hard she forgot herself. The woman who clung so tightly she smothered the very thing she loved most. You weren't evil. You weren't cruel. You were scared. Scared of being left behind. Scared of being irrelevant. Scared of not being needed. My hand trembled as I wrote, the words carving new space inside me. It wasn't all your fault, but some of it was, and that's okay. Because now you can learn, you can let go, you can love differently. The more I wrote, the lighter I felt. I thought of her voice again, the sharp sigh, the clipped tone. Beneath it, I heard not just anger, but exhaustion. The exhaustion of someone who had been fighting for her own identity against a mother who couldn't see her clearly. Tears blurred the page, But this time, they weren't just tears of sorrow. They were tears of acknowledgement, of responsibility. I closed the notebook and whispered to my reflection, I won't lose you again, not because I'll hold tighter, but because I'll finally learn to let go. For the first time, the mirror didn't feel like an enemy. It felt like a teacher. And I walked away not as a victim, not as a villain, but as a mother willing to face her own truth. I arrived early. The cafe was small, tucked into a quiet corner of the city, the kind of place where no one looked too closely at strangers. The air smelled of roasted beans and warm pastries. Soft jazz played in the background, but to me, it sounded like a countdown. Every tick of the clock above the counter thudded in my chest. I sat at a table by the window, hands wrapped around a mug I hadn't touched, steam curling up and fogging my glasses. Would she come, or had that maybe been just another goodbye? The bell above the door chimed. My heart stopped. And there she was. My daughter. Her hair was pulled back, her shoulders squared, her steps hesitant but strong. She looked older somehow, not just in years but in presence, like she had stepped into a world I hadn't been allowed to enter. For a moment, I couldn't move. I wanted to run to her, to hold her, to pour out every apology I had buried. But I stayed still. Because I knew, one wrong move, one desperate grab and she'd bolt. She spotted me, our eyes met. Her face didn't soften, it didn't harden either, it just froze like mine. She walked over slowly, slid into the chair across from me. No hug, no hello, just silence. The distance between us wasn't just the table. It was years of unsaid words, of broken trust, of love twisted into something suffocating. Finally I spoke, my voice barely above a whisper. Thank you for coming. She shrugged. I almost didn't. The words landed like stones, but I nodded. I know. A waitress came, placed a menu in front of her. She didn't touch it, just tapped her nails against the table, her eyes flicking to the window, to the door, anywhere but me. I wanted to scream into the silence. Instead, I asked, How have you been? Her laugh was sharp, bitter. Fine. One word, but it carried oceans. I sipped my untouched coffee, trying to steady my shaking hands. I heard about New York, I said gently. That's incredible. Her eyes finally met mine, cold, guarded. Don't pretend you're happy about it. The accusation hit me harder than any scream. I am, I whispered. I'm proud of you. She leaned back, arms crossed. You're proud now, when you never trusted me before, when you told me I wasn't ready for anything. Her words sliced open wounds I had just begun to stitch. I swallowed. You're right. I was afraid. I thought I was protecting you, but maybe I was just protecting myself. Her eyes flickered a crack, a question, but then the wall went back up. Silence again. Every sip, every clink of dishes from nearby tables felt magnified. People laughed around us, but at our table, the air was thick, suffocating. I wanted to reach across, to take her hand, but mine stayed glued to my cup. Finally, she said, Why did you want to meet? Her voice was sharp, impatient. I looked at her, at the girl I had raised, at the woman she was becoming. My throat ached. Because I don't want the last memory between us to be that suitcase. Her jaw clenched. The image flashed between us without words, the slam, the echo, the breaking. For the first time, her eyes softened, just a fraction, but enough to keep me breathing. Neither of us said, I love you. Neither of us apologized. But as she sat there, not leaving, not running, it felt like the beginning of something fragile. Something that might still be saved. I arrived early. The cafe was small, tucked into a quiet corner of the city, the kind of place where no one looked too closely at strangers. The air smelled of roasted beans and warm pastries. Soft jazz played in the background, but to me, it sounded like a countdown. Every tick of the clock above the counter thudded in my chest. I sat at a table by the window, hands wrapped around a mug I hadn't touched, steam curling up and fogging my glasses. Would she come, Or had that maybe been just another goodbye? The bell above the door chimed. My heart stopped. And there she was. My daughter. Her hair was pulled back, her shoulders squared, her steps hesitant but strong. She looked older somehow, not just in years but in presence, like she had stepped into a world I hadn't been allowed to enter. For a moment, I couldn't move. I wanted to run to her, to hold her, to pour out every apology I had buried. But I stayed still. Because I knew, one wrong move, one desperate grab and she'd bolt. She spotted me, our eyes met. Her face didn't soften, it didn't harden either, it just froze like mine. She walked over slowly, slid into the chair across from me. No hug, no hello, just silence. The distance between us wasn't just the table. It was years of unsaid words, of broken trust, of love twisted into something suffocating. Finally I spoke, my voice barely above a whisper. Thank you for coming. She shrugged. I almost didn't. The words landed like stones, but I nodded. I know. A waitress came, placed a menu in front of her. She didn't touch it, just tapped her nails against the table, her eyes flicking to the window, to the door, anywhere but me. I wanted to scream into the silence. Instead, I asked, How have you been? Her laugh was sharp, bitter. Fine. One word, but it carried oceans. I sipped my untouched coffee, trying to steady my shaking hands. I heard about New York, I said gently. That's incredible. Her eyes finally met mine, cold, guarded. Don't pretend you're happy about it. The accusation hit me harder than any scream. I am, I whispered. I'm proud of you. She leaned back, arms crossed. You're proud now, when you never trusted me before, when you told me I wasn't ready for anything. Her words sliced open wounds I had just begun to stitch. I swallowed. You're right. I was afraid. I thought I was protecting you, but maybe I was just protecting myself. Her eyes flickered a crack, a question, but then the wall went back up. Silence again. Every sip, every clink of dishes from nearby tables felt magnified. People laughed around us, but at our table, the air was thick, suffocating. I wanted to reach across, to take her hand, but mine stayed glued to my cup. Finally, she said, Why did you want to meet? Her voice was sharp, impatient. I looked at her, at the girl I had raised, at the woman she was becoming. My throat ached. Because I don't want the last memory between us to be that suitcase. Her jaw clenched. The image flashed between us without words, the slam, the echo, the breaking. For the first time, her eyes softened, just a fraction, but enough to keep me breathing. Neither of us said, I love you. Neither of us apologized. But as she sat there, not leaving, not running, it felt like the beginning of something fragile. Something that might still be saved. The rain poured harder, streaking down our faces, blurring tears with raindrops. We stood frozen on that sidewalk, two figures caught between past and future. My daughter's shoulders heaved, her fists clenched, her eyes blazing with every unspoken word. And then she said it. Mom, you have to let me go. If you want any place in my life, you have to stop holding me hostage with your love. You have to choose your fear or me. Her words struck like lightning. Choose. It wasn't just a daughter demanding freedom. It was a woman demanding respect. I opened my mouth, but nothing came. My throat burned with unshed sobs. Every instinct screamed to beg her not to leave, to promise her I'd change, to cling tighter. But another voice, quiet, trembling, new, whispered inside me. If you love her, you have to set her free. For years, I thought love meant protection, control, constant presence. But maybe love was the opposite. Love was the courage to step back. The storm raged around us, but inside me, something calmed. I took a deep breath. My voice shook, but I met her eyes. You're right. Her brows furrowed, suspicion flickering. What? You're right, I repeated. I was afraid of losing you, so afraid I smothered you. I confused love with fear, and in trying to hold on, I almost pushed you away forever. Tears rolled down my cheeks. But I don't want fear anymore. I want you, even if it means letting go. For the first time that night, her expression cracked. Shock, doubt, a flicker of hope. Do you mean that? She whispered. I nodded, sobbing openly now. I mean it with everything in me. I don't want to trap you. I want to see you fly. And if that means I'm not always by your side, I'll learn to live with that. Because your happiness matters more than my fear. The silence stretched. Only the rain spoke, tapping against the pavement, dripping from her hair, her lashes. Then she stepped closer, just one step, but it felt like miles crossed. Her voice broke as she asked, Then why didn't you say this before? Why now? I swallowed, because it took losing you to realize the truth. Sometimes the heart only learns when it breaks. She closed her eyes, her lips trembled. And then, in a voice so soft it almost vanished in the storm, she whispered, I wanted to hate you. I told myself I did, but I couldn't, because even when it hurt, I knew you loved me. You just didn't know how. The dam inside me burst. I sobbed, covering my mouth, my knees buckling. But she reached out. Her hand, small, shaking, touched mine. I froze, afraid to breathe. And then I felt it, her fingers curling around mine. Not fully, not tightly, but enough. Enough to say, I'm not done with you yet. We stood like that, mother and daughter, not healed, not whole, but together. The rain slowed. The clouds thinned. A pale glow of dawn peeked through the horizon. And in that fragile light, something inside both of us shifted. I whispered, I'll learn, I'll get better, not perfect, but better. She nodded, tears spilling freely now. That's all I ever wanted. For the first time in what felt like forever, she let me pull her into my arms. She sobbed into my shoulder, and I held her, not with chains, not with fear, but with release. Because this time, holding her didn't mean keeping her. It meant loving her enough to let her go when she needed to. As the city woke around us, as strangers passed and the world moved on, we stood in our own small universe, broken, bruised, but mending. And I knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a new story. A story not of control, but of trust, not of fear, but of freedom. Because my daughter was not my possession, she was my gift. And gifts are meant to be cherished, not caged. Her voice lingers in my memory, even now. Mom, I don't need you to hold me back. I just need you to believe I can move forward. And with those words, we stepped out of the storm into something brighter. Not perfect, not painless, but finally free.